18. Start broadcast. Okay, all attend start broadcast.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will get started in just about 1 minute. Please stay tuned.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started with the webinar. My name is Andrew Booker. I thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to provide you with information about our Community Waste Reduction Grant Program application process. We're recording this webinar, this presentation, and we'll make it available online by the end of the week. So if you missed part of it or if you want to see it again, it'll be available there. If you haven't noticed this or haven't figured this out yet, there is an application package handout available for download at the bottom of the GoToWebinar attendee control panel. It's also available via our website, SWACO.org, on the Community Waste Reduction Grant webpage. If you have that handy, if you printed that out already, or if you're able to view that on another screen, you may want to have it available because we'll make reference to it periodically throughout this presentation. We're scheduled for about 45 minutes today, and if you have questions at any time, you can type them into the chat box of the attendee control panel. I'm not going to try to direct you exactly where that is, but it should be pretty easy to find. We'll answer questions in the order that they're received at the end of the presentation, and if for some reason we run out of time and we don't get to your question, we'll follow up with an email response. And then before we kind of jump into the presentation, I just want to introduce ourselves a little bit more completely. As I indicated previously, my name is Andrew Booker. I'm the Programs Manager at SWACO. I've been here for a couple years, and prior to coming to SWACO, I was with Ohio EPA for about 20 years. So this is really my second cycle through the grant program. I'm going to let Christy Higginbotham introduce herself. She is the expert on the grant program. So with that, let me introduce Christy.
Thank you, Andrew. This is Christy Higginbotham. I'm a program administrator at SWACO, and I have the pleasure of working with Andrew in our Innovation and Programs Department. I've been with SWACO for over 18 years, and I focus on administering our school education programs as well as our grant programs. Today I'll be discussing important grant details and the process to apply for a community waste reduction grant. I'm also your contact for all grant-related questions and inquiries, any ideas that you may have. We really want to encourage you to reach out to me, discuss them prior to drafting your application, and you can do that by giving me a call or sending me an email. We'll have that contact information at the end of the presentation.
Before we get into those details about the grant application process, I do want to talk a little bit about who SWACO is and what we do. I think many of you are probably familiar with us, but it might be the first time through for some of you, and you might not be familiar with SWACO. We're a public agency. We're a governmental agency, and we're one of 52 such agencies, 52 solid waste management districts in the state of Ohio. We, at the Solid Waste District, we're obligated by law to develop a solid waste management plan and implement a variety of programs associated with waste diversion, composting, anything that really prevents waste from going to the landfill. In addition to all of those kind of programming designed to get material out of the landfill and prevent it from getting there, we also do operate the Franklin County Sanitary Landfill. It's a public landfill that accepts municipal solid waste from all of Franklin County. We've worked very hard over the years to position ourselves in the region as a leader in environmental sustainability, and we offer a whole range of waste reduction, recycling, and safe disposal services. One of the big things that we do, as an example, is we assist our communities and our schools in contracting for recycling services. We also provide recycling drop-offs, maybe 60 to 65 of them available throughout Franklin County. So those are two examples focused on kind of residential recycling. We work with retailers on a Bring Me Back campaign that is designed to encourage people to recycle their single-use plastic bags, film wrap, and other materials. We sponsor free yard waste composting for all of Franklin County residents. That's fairly unique in the state, actually, to have that kind of a service available. We do other things focused on proper disposal and proper management of waste. So, for instance, we partner very closely with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, City of Columbus, Franklin County Prosecuting Attorney's Office on an illegal dumping campaign, and we have a whole website devoted to that where people can report that and have those incidences investigated. We've got contracts to help communities recycle electronics, and we have a permanent household hazardous waste disposal facility, management facility that's available to Franklin County residents. And then finally, we also offer landfill tours. We have over 4,000 students that come down as part of annual field trips, and we also have numerous community landfill tours available throughout the year. That's really just a sampling of the things that we do. We have a lot of other programs available as well. Our vision at SWACO is to have a community that is environmentally safe and resourceful, and our mission is to improve the community's waste stream through effective reduction, recycling, and disposal practices. And to that end, we put a lot of resources towards educating residents and businesses about the importance of diverting waste from the landfill through recycling, composting, these things that I've talked about already. We've done a good job. We've made a lot of progress over the years, and in fact, we are now at over 50% recycling rate. Right around that 49 to 50% recycling. It's higher than the state average. It's higher than the national average. It's over 1 million tons a year that are diverted through these recycling and composting programs. So it's really very encouraging. And we're very proud of it. We've still got a long ways to go. We have ambitious goals to actually divert 75% of that material by 2032, and that's part of our solid waste management plan. And so this grant program is really an opportunity to provide funding to organizations that are going to have interesting ideas, innovative ideas, and want to kind of do new and different things for themselves and things that will help us achieve that goal. So with that, we'll kind of, I think, get into the nuts and bolts of the grant program.
Sure. So some of the material that you might be interested in diverting or thinking about diverting as part of activities that you want to implement could include these items on the right side of the picture. So I'll quickly discuss the materials that could be collected for recycling in both traditional and non-traditional recycling programs. So the materials on the right side of this slide are accepted by most traditional single stream or mixed recycling programs in Franklin County. That said, these are not the only materials that can be diverted. You may generate different materials that can be diverted through source reduction, reuse, or through a specialty collection program or service. This could include items such as food waste, textiles, furniture, and electronics, which are not materials that you would put in your traditional recycling container at work or at home. And so our hope is that by offering our grants program and collaborating with partners that share our passion for waste reduction and diversion, we'll continue to increase the diversion rate. So now let's talk a little bit about just our grants program in general. SWACO's grants program consists of two different grant offerings. The Community Waste Reduction Grant, which is what you're here for today, and then we also have an Event Waste Reduction Grant program. So both of these programs have different grant cycles, and were created to promote waste reduction, recycling, and reuse projects within our jurisdiction. They do fall under the purview of our Innovation and Programs Department, which is focused on building collaborative partnerships that impact and improve the waste stream, leverage the waste stream for economic benefit, and contribute to a safe and healthy community. And so one thing about how we administer our grant programs at SWACO is we really like to be hands-on and provide as much technical assistance and guidance with respect to best management practices as possible. And so, again, we do view this as a collaboration and are looking to learn from our grant recipients about their experiences and successes and challenges along the way as well. We'll get into a little bit more of the details specific to this Community Waste Reduction Grant Program now. So I'm going to begin referencing the grant application information document sections, beginning with our grant funding section that's found on page 1 at the bottom of the page. And so under this section, the funding for the grant program is limited. It is a reimbursement grant for those that are chosen award recipients, and it will be for all grant-approved expenditures, provided that the award recipient has submitted all required documentation as described in the final report. So basically, if your grant application is chosen to be awarded, we will enter into an agreement with you and then reimburse you the costs for the approved program activities. Under some circumstances, 50% of the funding can be awarded up front. You want to make sure that you indicate that and make that request in your application document. And you'll have the opportunity to do that in the project budget form, and we'll get to that in a little bit more later. So the range of funding is a minimum of $500 and a maximum of $35,000. And a 25% cash match is required. And so you will also be asked to describe your cash match in the budget form. And we'll get into that a little bit more later in the presentation. So under applicant eligibility, this is a competitive grant program, and applications are weighted against each other and evaluated by an internal SWACO review committee. The committee is made up of representatives from our legal, finance, and innovation and programs departments. In order for an application to be evaluated by our review committee, there are some fundamental criteria that must be met, and these are also laid out on page 2 of your application information document. Beginning with, the program activities must occur in the 2020 calendar year. Eligible applicants include, but are not limited to, communities, schools, parks, and nonprofits. Private for-profit businesses are not eligible to apply under this grant program. The applicant and project must be located in SWACO's jurisdiction, which is comprised of Franklin County and includes the cities of Canal Winchester, Dublin, New Albany, Reynoldsburg, and Westerville. So the map shows Pickerington and parts of Lysopolis, but these communities are outside of SWACO's jurisdiction since the majority of the community is outside of Franklin County. Also on page 2, we'll talk a little bit here about the application requirements. So the deadline to submit an application, including your required supporting documentation, is September 20th, 2019 by 5 p.m. We will not contact applicants to request missing information. That said, we are available to talk with you about your ideas and questions. We encourage you to reach out prior to submitting. We do request questions be asked by September 13th in order to allow enough time for a response. However, if they come in after that, we will do our best to respond to inquiries. The application must be completed and submitted, again, by the entity responsible for implementing the project. So consultants, contractors, vendors, or unaffiliated individuals cannot submit on behalf of the entity responsible for implementing the project. Funding requests for expanding or improving an existing project or program must provide a detailed explanation of current activities and how funding will improve the project or the program. Sure.
I'd just like to interject one thing. I want to kind of reinforce something that Christy said. You've got time at this point, so we would really encourage you, if you have an idea, to call Christy directly a lot. She spends plenty of time on the phone with potential applicants. Some of our best applications start out as just a conversation or just an idea, particularly if you've never submitted an application for one of our grants and you're not even sure whether the idea makes sense. Just call Christy, have that conversation. That will kind of lead us down the right path. We can tell, I know everybody's busy, but we can certainly tell those applications that were put together in the last couple of days before the application deadline versus those that have had an engagement with us and one or more conversations over time. Makes a big difference. Christy's very friendly and very helpful, and so I would really encourage you to give her a call and start with just a very informal conversation.
Thank you, Andrew. It really is to your benefit, and we certainly don't want anybody to waste their time. So yes, we do encourage you to do that. And lastly, we also need to make sure that applicants don't have any outstanding financial or compliance issues. Okay, so to talk a little bit about our project categories, you'll find these also on page 2 of the handout. These categories have been identified for potential funding opportunities under this grant program. So when thinking about the program you're designing for this application, ask yourself, does this concept or idea reduce waste generated or divert recyclable materials from the waste stream? These categories can kind of help serve as a guiding tool in helping you to think about the innovative possibilities of your diversion program. And they include waste reduction and reuse, obviously recycling. These can be recycling initiatives that significantly increase the diversion of recyclable materials from the landfill and or address difficult or hard to recycle materials. Organic waste, food waste diversion projects that focus specifically on reducing or diverting organic materials such as food or yard waste, and activities that enhance public awareness through targeted education and outreach efforts. And oftentimes, there's always some kind of a component of targeted education and outreach that goes along with these activities as well. Sorry, just bear with us one second.
We're just peeking just to see if any questions have come up, and we're good to go. And I just want to check the chat as well. And we're good to go. Okay.
Okay. So if you're asking for funding for activities that include the collection and diversion of materials, please be sure to describe the items and the materials that are being collected and where those materials are being taken for sorting or processing. This is really important. A lot of times we'll find applicants are requesting to recycle certain items that aren't necessarily accepted for recycling at this time in Central Ohio, and we have a really good handle on what is accepted and who's accepting it and where it can go. So again, that's another opportunity for you to reach out and engage us to have those conversations about what you might be interested in collecting for recycling, if that's your focus. So moving on to the eligible use of funds, this starts at the top of page 3 in the handout. This section of the application provides guidance and examples of acceptable uses of grant funding. Funding requests can be made for equipment, supplies, and/or professional services. Eligible items can include, but are not limited to, the following. So durable, reusable equipment to be used specifically for waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and composting. This could include reusable or containers for recycling, signage, and processing equipment. Equipment descriptions and their intended uses and pricing must be provided with the application. So we're looking for quotes for you to provide as your supporting documentation. If you're awarded, the equipment purchased with grant dollars must be maintained for at least 3 years. Supplies for education, outreach, and awareness activities. So eligible education initiatives should also focus on reuse, recycling, diversion, or composting. And we are also looking for a description of the materials and their intended use with pricing. So again, quotes are sufficient. Oftentimes, if people are intending to buy something online, they'll just provide an online quote that they've received from a website, and that's perfectly okay. And then with respect to professional services, this can include contractual expenses relating to the provision of waste reduction, diversion, hauling, but then also consulting or planning services. And so, again, transport and hauling must tie it directly back to recycling or composting. We cannot reimburse for costs associated with solid waste hauling or trash hauling. And then a scope of services, will suffice as your supporting documentation for these types of services. We recognize oftentimes people have not executed an agreement and, with a consultant or with a provider that they can attach to their grant application. And so if you can attach a scope of services or a quote from the consultant, that will suffice as the supporting documentation that we're looking for when we evaluate these. And then we just ask that you please keep in mind that the programs are sustainable and they work towards increased diversion with measurable impacts. And so, we're looking at the sustainability and the long-term social, economic, and environmental benefits of your project. And so we're looking for that to be emphasized. And so programs that only occur once or that don't describe a long-term plan, are going to score a little bit less than those that do. Okay, so please remember that if your grant application is approved, any expenditures made prior to both parties signing the grant agreement cannot be reimbursed. And so as soon as both parties have signed the agreement, approved purchases can be made. This program does not provide funding for the same program activities as previously awarded under a SWACO grant. And so funding for in-house personnel costs, overhead or indirect costs, general office supplies and equipment, food and catering, equipment and services relating to the disposal of trash, hazardous waste, recycling, or disposal, and equipment not directly tied to recycling and or composting are ineligible. Services that support existing diversion activities are also not eligible. However, funding to replace existing program costs will be considered if the proposed activities significantly expand or improve existing programs or activities. And additionally, non-durable single-use items and other costs not related to waste reduction and diversion cannot be considered. So now I'm just going to discuss a few of our grant recipients in 2018, just kind of give you a flavor for the programs that were approved there and what we considered to be pretty comprehensive. So in 2018, we awarded 11 grant funding requests totaling more than $99,000. I'll give you an example of 3 of these partners, and this included Otterbein University. They were awarded funding to purchase water bottle filling stations and reusable water bottles to be distributed to their incoming students. They had already installed 17 filling stations on their own, and they were able to provide information in their grant request to us to benchmark some of the diversion that had occurred from installing water bottle filling stations. Their stations had a counter on them showing how many water bottles were saved each time somebody used them, which is a great feature to have in order to gain some data. We really look to measure the impact that these programs have, and so anytime you can include information relating to data that you are willing to share with us, that's great. We want to hear more about that always. Their student affairs distributed information materials to the student body and their sustainability committee, and they conducted pre and post surveys. So this was a nice sampling of some qualitative data that they were able to provide to us in terms of understanding the learning that had occurred on campus. And so this was a nice example of a project aimed at reducing and reusing, but then also included a well-planned outreach and education initiative, again, to help measure the impact of the program. Hilliard City Schools was awarded funding to work with a collection and off-site composting company to implement the first district-wide cafeteria food waste composting program in a Franklin County school district. The district worked with SWACO and the vendor to develop education and outreach materials, and they continue to serve on our Central Ohio Food Waste Initiative advisory group. And the City of Hilliard was awarded funding to assist with the purchase of recycling containers and signage to implement a new single-stream recycling program at the Hilliard Aquatic Center. And they also conducted some activities which included a pre- and post-waste audit so that they could better understand the materials generated and the diversion impact of the new program. So these are our 2019 awardees. We awarded 14 funding requests totaling more than $178,000. And a couple of these projects included an award to the Columbus Association for the Performing Arts. CAPA received funding to hire a consultant to conduct a waste minimization study and to develop an action plan for waste diversion and recycling. So prior to the development of the study, the consultant that was retained and SWACO is also working with them to collect data to provide a baseline from which they can measure future improvements. And so based on the consultant study and the findings, CAPA will be able to assess as to how to best implement a recycling program in their staff offices and public-facing recycling beginning at the Ohio Theater. And then we also had the City of Westerville, who received funding to purchase new recycling containers for the city's uptown outdoor public area. This is an example of a grant recipient that received funding to expand and improve upon an existing program. And as part of that, they're going to be conducting pre- and post-waste audits and consulting with SWACO on best management practices as to how they can best implement that public-facing program through the use of more effective lids and signage. Okay, so next we'll quickly discuss each form that is required to be completed and submitted with your application in more depth. Form A is your applicant cover page. This just includes pertinent contact information for the applicant and provides a snapshot of the project information. Form B is the project summary and narrative document. And this is where we're really going to get into the nuts and bolts of your program and providing a nice description of the sustainability and impact that it will have. Form C is your budget request form. And so just please keep in mind that any applications missing any of these forms cannot be considered. So it's really important to make sure you submit all of these. And then there's also a checklist that's provided. This does not need to be submitted. It's just for your use to make sure that you've got everything that needs to be included in your application request. So Form A, the application cover page, it asks for your contact information, and again, just includes that relevant project information that we're looking for and just kind of like a snapshot. The certification section at the bottom should be signed by the person responsible for submitting the application and certifying that the information provided is true and accurate. Form B, your summary and narrative, includes the executive summary, which should be no more than 2 pages, and a project narrative, which should be 5 pages or less. And so really what we're looking for here is your executive summary as a separate document that is again, summarizing your proposed project and activities. And then the narrative should address each one of the questions in the order in which they're asked. So this is your opportunity to explain why your project should be selected for funding. A large part of your application will be evaluated based on the information provided in this section. And so please be sure to answer all the questions in the order that they appear on this form. Please clearly describe the goals and the objectives of your project and be sure to address how you plan to measure the impact again. That's something that's really important to us. We're also looking for the transferability of successful waste reduction and diversion strategies and how those activities will be sustained and if they'll continue into the future. And then if you're collaborating with other partners or you're creating jobs or you can identify the number of people affected through the implementation of your project, this all makes your application stronger. Also ensuring that the project activities are well defined and described, again, in the sequence for implementation is really important. So we're looking for all of these things, and then also the applicant to demonstrate a sound fiscal management and provide a realistic budget with a justified need for financial support is pretty critical. And so that kind of segues into Form C, which is our project budget. And one thing I'll point out here is that it requires a 25% cash match. And so this is 25% of the total amount of grant funding being requested, as illustrated in the example. So if you are asking for $10,000, the cash match is $2,500 or 25% of the requested grant funds. And so that has to be directly tied to the program or the project that the funding is being requested for. We also require applicants to itemize all grant items and associated costs. And so there's space in the table for you to do that. We ask that you identify if the cost was part of the grant request or the match in that table as well. And then below that table is a space that speaks to the budget summary. And so we're also looking for a summary and narrative of your budget separate from this, which should be no more than 2 pages and should describe each item as requested for grant funding and how it will be used in the project. And this is also the place where an applicant can request to receive 50% upfront funding. And so if your application is chosen to be awarded and you've identified that you would like to receive 50% upfront funding, we will draft the agreement to include that for you. But we do ask that it be identified in the application. Supporting documentation pertaining to your request can include quotes for equipment, supplies, and professional services. Again, we're looking for a scope of work relating to the professional services. If you have a contract, you could provide that as well. But we cannot award funding for any items that do not have supporting documentation attached. And then again, I'll just mention any purchases that are made prior to the execution of a grant agreement, and by execution I mean we have selected your project for funding and we have both signed an agreement. Any purchases made prior to both parties signing an agreement cannot be approved or cannot be reimbursed for funding, even if it's something that was identified as eligible and SWACO will provide funding for it. Please don't make any purchases until after you've received that award notification and we've executed the agreement. So this is just again, the application checklist. This does not have to be submitted. It's really just for your own internal use. And this is our timeline. So again, our applications are due by September 20th. At that point, the evaluation committee will convene and review and score all grant applications in October and November. And then all applicants will be notified of their status in November. At the time of notification, award recipients will be invited to attend an informational meeting at SWACO to learn more about our internal process, terms of the agreement. We'll provide you with your agreements at that time, and then, of course, answer any questions or concerns that you may have at that meeting. And then the goal is to have all grant agreements signed and executed in January of 2020 in order for programs and projects to commence, at the kickoff of the calendar year. And then applicants or recipients, rather, will have until the end of the calendar year, December 31st, 2020, to complete all projects. Okay, so I am going to stop talking for now, and we're going to open up our control panel for questions and our chat box for any comments you may have as well.
So now's the time. We don't have any questions lined up yet, so now would be the time to go ahead and just ask your question via the question or the chat box. We'll check both of them. The other thing I'll mention, and I don't recall whether we did at the beginning of this webinar, is that on our grant webpage, we have videos posted of several of the grant recipients that Christy identified in that one slide. So Otterbein, Franklinton CycleWorks, Franklinton Farms, COSI. Those, I think, are, again, if you're kind of new to the idea of a grant, a waste reduction grant, those, I think, are good examples of really, very positive programs that people have implemented through the grant project. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those for some ideas and inspiration, maybe.
So it looks like one question we have is compostable serviceware eligible for funding? Under this program's grant eligibility, this is not eligible for funding. We consider this to be a disposable. So items like bags, even if they are compostable, items like plastic cups or paper cups, all of those types of disposables are ineligible under this grant program.
Let me answer another question. So there's a question, if we currently do not have recycling services provided by a hauler and we would like to request those services as part of grant funding, is that an eligible cost? The answer is, it is an eligible cost, but the review committee would look for documentation that shows how you would sustain those costs beyond the funding year. And also we wouldn't, trash removal costs would not be eligible. But the important point there really is just that we're looking for sustainable programs. So we would not be, too interested in funding a program that was just costs associated with 1 year where there was no indication that there would be a way to sustain that program beyond the grant funding cycle.
Yes. And we have another question. Are past grantees eligible to receive funding this cycle? Yes, you are eligible to apply. We would not consider funding the same program activities that were previously awarded. Now, if it was to expand or improve upon existing activities, that could definitely be considered.
There are, for example, just as an example of that, there are sometimes maybe grant applicants who have a little bit of a complicated facility or something that we're looking to implement a new recycling or composting program, and they might ask for grant funding to help do a study that would then, maybe they would come back later and have a grant that would be more focused on implementing the project. So there can be kind of phases potentially to projects as well.
Yeah, and okay, so we have a few more questions, just bear with me. Can you repeat the locations that are not in SWACO's jurisdiction? Yes, so there were just a few examples that I had given. That was Lysopolis and other cities, Pickerington, and other cities that do not have 50% or more of their population within Franklin County. So there are communities, for example, like Canal Winchester, Dublin, New Albany, Reynoldsburg, and Westerville that go into other counties, but since 50% of their population or more is within Franklin County, they're within SWACO's jurisdiction. So a couple of examples of communities that aren't would be Lysopolis and Pickerington. And if you want me to send you more clarification on that, I can certainly do that. Just send me an email.
Next question is it okay if your project idea fits into more than one category, such as recycling and organic waste, food waste diversion? And the answer is certainly, absolutely. That would be not a problem at all.
Yeah, you could just check both of those off.
Any more questions? We'll just pause here just for a moment to see if there are any more questions. I don't think so. So we'd just like to thank you again for participating today in the webinar. As we mentioned, if you want to review any of this information, this will be posted soon, by the end of the week, we would think. And if you have any additional questions that you think of later today, tomorrow, you can certainly email at grants@swaco.org, or you can email Christy directly. And we'd be happy to answer those, or pick up the phone and give a call. So just be in touch.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody.